Welcome to Conspiracy Q. This week, we're launching a top-secret investigation into a seriously disturbing theory, the alleged deep and ongoing involvement
of the CIA in global drug trafficking. You recently provided us with some really explosive, recently uncovered or classified sources suggesting this isn't just some far-out idea, but a horrifying reality with profound consequences. Our mission on this Conspiracy Q podcast is to dissect the core arguments and the uncovered evidence you shared. We want to understand the underlying logic of this alleged connection and the specific examples that keep surfacing. We'll be looking at claims of shadowy, untraceable funding, alleged covert operations, and the controversies surrounding those who dared
to peel back
the layers of secrecy.
It's a theory that, as you said, persists in the shadows, often met with skepticism or outright dismissal. But what's fascinating and frankly unsettling is how certain patterns emerge and how many crucial questions remain unanswered.
It makes you wonder why this narrative continues to grip people. The central claim itself is staggering. That an agency entrusted with national security could have become so deeply entangled in an activity that causes so much global harm.
Okay, so let's dive right into that core allegation, as we understand it. From the recently uncovered or classified sources you sent, the central theory is that the CIA didn't just occasionally encounter drug trafficking, it allegedly became a major, almost systemic facilitator of the global narcotics trade, not just turning a blind eye here and there, but actively enabling and perhaps even orchestrating aspects of it. And the primary motivation, as alleged, boils down to off-the-books funding for covert operations, the kind of activities that wouldn't pass congressional scrutiny.
That's the crux of it. Think about it. Covert operations, by their very nature, operate outside of traditional oversight. They require substantial financial resources. But these can't always be openly declared or accounted for. So this raises a fundamental question. Where do you find those vast, unaccountable sums?
And the theory, of course, points directly to the immense shadowy world of the narcotics trade. We're talking about an industry generating billions of dollars in untraceable cash, operating outside the normal financial systems. The argument is that the CIA, with its global network, its expertise in clandestine operations, and its inherent culture of secrecy, was uniquely positioned to tap into this illicit revenue stream. It's a dark logic, but a compelling one for those who subscribe to this theory.
If we connect this to the LD sub, nuts and bolts of intelligence work, consider the logistical challenges. You need to move personnel, weapons, and other resources discreetly across borders. The drug trade, unfortunately, already had those established routes and networks in place. The argument is that CIA allegedly leveraged this existing infrastructure, perhaps even becoming intertwined with it, to facilitate their own objective.
This is where some of the most disturbing specifics start to emerge. From the recently uncovered or classified sources, the Iran-Contra Affair and the whole Contra rebellion in Nicaragua are frequently cited. For those who might not recall all the details, can you give us a quick overview of that context?
In the 1980s, the CIA was heavily involved in supporting the Contra rebels in Nicaragua, who were opposing the Sandinista government, to the U.S. Congress, through a series of legislative measures known as the Boland Amendments, actually restricted, and eventually cut off official funding for this support. So the Reagan administration found itself in a bind. It wanted to continue backing the Contras, but lacked a legal and transparent means to do so.
And it's right there, in that funding gap, that the alleged drug connection is said to have flourished. The recently uncovered or classified sources you shared mentioned the Kerry Committee Report from 1989. What were the key findings of that investigation
regarding drug trafficking?
What's particularly striking about the Kerry Committee Report is that it found significant evidence indicating that elements within the Contras supply network were indeed involved in cocaine trafficking into the United States.
The report went so far as to state that U.S. officials, in their zeal to support the Contras, failed to address the drug issue for fear of jeopardizing the war effort. It even explicitly noted that individuals and groups actively supporting the Contras were also engaged in drug trafficking activities.
So this wasn't just a few isolated incidents or rogue actors, the Kerry Committee seemed to suggest. A more pervasive issue where the drug connections were known, or at least strongly suspected, by those in positions of power, but were deliberately overlooked for the sake of the larger political agenda.
Precisely. And this leads directly to the don't ask, don't tell accusation.
Right.
That frequently surfaces In these discussions, the theory posits that the CIA's supposed ignorance of the drug trafficking within its own supply chain wasn't simply a failure of intelligence. It was a calculated decision.
Right.
How could an agency with such vast resources and intelligence-gathering capabilities remain completely in the dark about such a substantial flow of narcotics? The argument is that the drug money essentially became a crucial, albeit illicit, lifeline.
Yeah.
For the Contra operation,
Yeah.
when official funding had been cut.
It paints a very troubling picture of potential complicity at the highest levels. The recently uncovered or classified sources also highlight the story of journalist Gary Webb and his Dark Alliance series. This seems to have ignited a firestorm of controversy around these very allegations. Can you tell us about his central claims?
Gary Webb's 1996 series
in
the San Jose Mercury News made an incredibly explosive claim. He directly linked the CIA-backed Contras to the very origins of the crack cocaine epidemic that devastated communities in Los Angeles.
Wow.
This wasn't just about funding a foreign war. It was about the alleged consequences playing out on American streets.
That's a staggering accusation. So what was the specific connection Webb outlined? How did the Contras allegedly contribute to the crack epidemic in L.A.?
Webb's reporting detailed how individuals with direct ties to the Contras, specifically Danilo Blandin and Nora Meneses, allegedly imported and sold massive quantities of cheap cocaine in Los Angeles. Crucially, he argued that the immense profits generated from these sales were then funneled back to support the Contra rebels in Nicaragua. Furthermore, Webb claimed that the CIA was fully aware of this operation and actively shielded these traffickers from law enforcement intervention to ensure the continued flow of illicit funds to their proxy army.
The implications are mind-boggling. An agency of the U.S. government allegedly facilitating the spread of a highly addictive and destructive drug within its own borders to fund a foreign conflict. The backlash against Webb must have been ferocious.
It was. Major media outlets launched intense and often highly critical attacks on his reporting, questioning his sources, his evidence, and his journalistic integrity. The CIA itself launched internal investigations to vehemently counter his claims. What's particularly interesting here is that the CIA's Inspector General report in 1998 did acknowledge that the agency had maintained relationships with individuals involved in drug trafficking and had, on occasion, intervened with law enforcement. On their behalf, however, they vehemently denied any systematic plot or involvement in fueling the crack cocaine epidemic.
But as those who believe this theory point out, even those admissions by the CIA are deeply troubling. The fact that they had dealings with drug traffickers and interfered with law enforcement for operational reasons, that raises a lot of very serious questions about their priorities and potential culpability.
Exactly. For those who subscribe to this theory, these admissions, coupled with the intense pressure and eventual professional ruin that Gary Webb faced, are seen not as exoneration, but as further evidence of a high-level cover-up. They believe he unearthed a truth that powerful forces desperately wanted to suppress. And then, of course, you have the grim detail of Gary Webb's death in 2004. 2 gunshot wounds, ruled a suicide.
Right.
Given the context of his reporting, it's a detail that continues to fuel intense suspicion and speculation within the conspiracy theory community.
It's a detail that certainly casts a long shadow. The recently uncovered or classified sources also take us back further in history to Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War, suggesting that this alleged pattern of involvement with the drug trade may have earlier origins. Tell us about the claims surrounding the Golden Triangle and Air America.
This brings in the work of historian Alfred W. McCoy, whose book, The Politics of Heroin, CIA Complicity in the Global Drug Trade, is considered a seminal work. By many who investigate this topic, McCoy meticulously documented alleged CIA involvement in the opium and heroin trade in the Golden Triangle, the region encompassing parts of Burma, Laos, and Thailand. During the Vietnam War, the argument isn't necessarily that CIA agents were directly involved in selling drugs on street corners, but rather they allegedly turned a blind eye to, or even actively facilitated, the involvement of their anti-communist allies, such as the H-Mon tribesmen in Laos in the opium trade.
And the alleged motivation in that earlier scenario would have been simple for
a situation, right? Supporting these local allies who were fighting communism, even if it meant tolerating or enabling their involvement in the drug trade. Precisely. The theory goes that the CIA needed the cooperation of these local groups to wage their clandestine war against communist forces. And for many of these groups, the opium trade was a crucial source of their power, their finances, and their economy. Furthermore, The recently uncovered or classified sources you provided mentioned CIA proprietary airlines, most notably Air America, which allegedly played a significant role in transporting opium and heroin in exchange for this military cooperation and access stuff.
So the idea is that Southeast Asia may have served as a kind of early model or testing ground for using drug profits and logistical networks to support proxy forces in situations where direct government funding was either unavailable or politically problematic.
That's the core of the argument. Theorists see a recurring pattern, a consistent need for off-the-books funding, for covert operations, and a perceived willingness on the part of the CIA to engage with, or at least tolerate, the drug trade to achieve broader geopolitical objectives.
Beyond these specific historical events, the recently uncovered or classified sources also allude to, more general, persistent rumors and anecdotal accounts that contribute to this overarching theory. These are the kinds of stories that are hard to nail down with concrete proof, but continue to circulate.
Exactly. What's interesting is the consistency of these whispers, the stories of certain flights or shipments that were widely believed to be carrying narcotics and yet seemed to move with unusual ease, bypassing customs checks or avoiding scrutiny altogether, while hard evidence for these specific instances is often elusive. Their persistence in the narrative contributes to the overall sense that there was some level of high-level protection at play.
It's like these recurring rumors act as pieces of circumstantial evidence, reinforcing the broader narrative for those who already suspect this kind of involvement, and the sheer scale and logistical complexity
of the global drug trade itself is another point often raised by proponents of this theory. Absolutely, the logistics involved in moving tons of illicit drugs across continents are immense. Theorists argue that it's virtually impossible for these vast networks to operate on such a scale without at least some degree of state complicity or deliberate non-interference. Could the intelligence agencies of the world, with all their surveillance capabilities, really be completely unaware of these massive operations? It prompts questions about what they know, what they choose to ignore, and why.
And the recently uncovered or classified sources you shared also touch on the deep skepticism that many within this theoretical framework hold towards official investigations into these matters, such as the Kerry Committee or the CIA's own internal reports.
The argument here is that these official inquiries, while sometimes acknowledging certain problematic connections or failures of oversight, are ultimately limited in their scope and designed to contain the potential scandal, rather than to fully expose the underlying truth. The fact that many relevant documents from these periods remain classified only serves to fuel this suspicion and the belief that there's more to the story than what has been officially released. There's an inherent distrust of official narratives at the heart of many conspiracy theories, and this is a prime example.
It creates a kind of self-reinforcing cycle of suspicion where any official denial or limited admission is interpreted as further evidence of a more elaborate cover-up. The recently uncovered or classified sources also hint at the unsettling idea of individuals who may have spoken out or knew too much, meeting unfortunate ends, or being systematically discredited.
This is certainly one of the darker and more speculative aspects of the theory, involving claims, often difficult to verify independently, of potential whistleblowers or informants who may have possessed sensitive information about these alleged operations and subsequently suffer negative consequences. The mention of Barry Seal, the major drug smuggler, who turned DEA informant and had alleged ties to the Contras and who was assassinated, is a key example. Often cited in this context, theorists often believe he was silenced because he knew too much about potential CIA connections to the drug trade.
It paints a picture of a potentially ruthless and highly secretive operation, where anyone who gets too close to the truth might face severe repercussions. And all of this leads to what the recently uncovered or classified sources refer to as the grand lie theory. Can you elaborate on that concept?
The grand lie theory suggests that the entire war on drugs, the public pronouncements, the billions of dollars spent on law enforcement and interdiction, was, at least in part, a carefully constructed facade. The underlying argument is that, while the government publicly condemned the evils of narcotics trafficking, certain elements within the intelligence community secretly viewed the drug trade as a valuable, albeit illicit, asset, a reliable source of untraceable funding for covert operations, and a potential tool for geopolitical manipulation.
So the truly cynical interpretation is that the real war wasn't against drugs themselves, but rather a hidden, clandestine war for control of the drug trade and its immense profits, with the CIA playing a shadowy, unacknowledged role behind the scenes.
Exactly. And the devastating impact that the drug trade has had on communities, particularly marginalized communities, isn't simply seen as unfortunate collateral damage. Proponents of this theory argue that it was a direct and perhaps even intended consequence, an acceptable price to pay for funding secret wars and maintaining plausible deniability. It's a truly chilling and deeply unsettling perspective.
So there you have it, a top-secret investigation into the deeply disturbing allegations of the CIA's connection to global drug trafficking, based on the recently uncovered or classified sources you provided. For this Conspiracy Q podcast, we've unpacked the core arguments, examined the specific historical events that are frequently cited, and explored the persistent questions and suspicions that continue to fuel this theory. What stands out to you as the most compelling or the most disturbing piece of this intricate puzzle? What connections did you find most unsettling? This top-secret investigation certainly raises profound and uncomfortable questions about the nature of power, the justifications for covert action, and the potentially devastating consequences of unchecked secrecy within the highest levels of government. The information you shared with us in your recently uncovered or classified sources certainly provides a lot to consider about the hidden currents that may be shaping our world in ways we don't fully understand. We encourage you to continue exploring these complex and unsettling issues and to draw your own conclusions. Rate and follow Conspiracy Q to share the truth. And stay tuned for more shocking revelations.
It leaves you with a profound sense of unease, doesn't it? The very notion that the institutions designed to protect us could potentially be involved in something so deeply destructive challenges our fundamental assumptions about trust and accountability. Perhaps the most haunting question raised by all this is, if even a fraction of these allegations are true, what does that say about the hidden costs of our foreign policy?